Noah's Ark and the Great Floods. Other than the story of creation, another story which has been a source of great debate and analysis is the story of the Great Flood, and whether it was a narration of historical events or a myth. Who was Noah? Was he real? Did he really save humanity and repopulate the world as the Bible tells us? Join us once again as we embark on another epic adventure to explore facts and history of this grand extinction level event. The Bible tells of the story of Noah, how he found favor with God and was spared from a global purge that cleansed the earth of sinners and iniquity. These accounts were recorded in the book of Genesis chapter 6 to 9. In the beginning of chapter 6, the Bible spoke of people multiplying and heavenly beings taking mates of them and bearing superhuman offspring, and how God proposed to reduce human lifespan from hundreds of years to just over 120 years. When the Lord saw how wicked everyone on earth was, and how evil their thoughts were all the time, he was sorry that he had ever made them and put them on the earth. He was so filled with regret that he said, "I will wipe out these people I have created, and also the animals and the birds, because I am sorry that I made any of them." But the Lord was pleased with Noah. God said to Noah, "I have decided to put an end to these people. I will destroy them completely, because the world is full of their violent deeds. Build a boat for yourself out of good timber, make rooms in it, and cover it with tar inside and out. Make it 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for the boat and leave a space of 18 inches between the roof and the sides. Build it with 3 decks and put a door in the side. But I will make a covenant with you. Go into the boat with your wife, your sons, and their wives. Take into the boat with you a male and a female of every kind of animal and every kind of bird, in order to keep them alive. Take along all kinds of food for you and for them." Noah did everything that God commanded. The high points of chapter 7 were the magnitude of the floods. It became so deep that it covered the highest mountains. It went on rising until it was about 25 feet above the top of the mountains. Every living being on earth died. Every bird, every animal, and every person. Everything on earth that breathed died. The water did not start going down for 150 days. The 8th chapter dealt with the aftermath of the flood, the drying up of the waters, and the final resting place of the ark. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the boat came to rest on a mountain in the Ararat range. This story sounds so much like a tale brewed up by some great-grandparent to mold the young ones into living a godly life and avert the God's wrath. However, there are more reasons to believe it. Some of these are the many ancient flood stories that were the results of gods or a god sending a form of punishment for perceived disrespect or the evils of humans. These were told by many ancient peoples and ancient civilizations. These may lay credence to the similar descent and the possibility of a huge flood that decimated all or part of the globe. The Quranic account of the flood and Noah's Ark agrees with that given in the Bible, with a few variations. One of these concerns is the final resting place of the ark. According to the book of Genesis, the ark grounded itself on Mount Ararat, while according to the Quran, the final resting place of the vessel was called Mount Judi. Perhaps one of the oldest flood stories is one of the earliest known to man, from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Recorded on 12 cuneiform stone tablets, this was among the first pieces of literature in human history. According to the poems, Gilgamesh a Sumerian king who reigned for 126 years, was confronted after the death of his friend with his own mortality. He began to search for immortality and met an immortal man named Utnapishtim, whose story is very much like the story of Noah. He had been given a charge to build a vessel to save his family and all species of creatures from a great flood the god Enlil was sending their way because of the great evils of man. It was said that Utnapishtim was gifted eternal life because he listened to the instructions of a god Enlil and saved humanity. Other similarities of this story include the measurements and the use of pitch or tar. A variant is the story of Zuisidra, who was spared by the god Enki, who did not agree with the other gods to kill all humans since he was humble and obedient. Zuisudri did as Enki commanded and built a huge boat in which he successfully rode out the flood. Afterwards, he prostrated himself to the gods and Anu and Enlil, and as a reward for living a godly life, he was given immortality. Another Mesopotamian myth is the story of Atrahasis, a wise man who was saved from the flood after being warned by one of the gods to build a ship to save himself. This is perceived a variant of the story of Utnapishtim. These stories bear a striking similarity to that of Noah. Could this be a variant of the story with the same origin? Some cultures' flood stories bear only a slight resemblance to the story of Noah's Ark. They, however, maintain the theme of the Ark and an angry God, but their repopulation stories are wildly different. In this flood story, Titlaquan warned a man named Note and his wife Nena of a coming flood. Note and Nena carved out a tree, and Titlaquan sealed them inside it, telling them that they may only eat 1 ear of maize each a day. The earth was flooded, and the people turned into fish rather than died. After the flood, the obviously hungry survivors disobeyed the god and ate some of the fish, and were in return turned to dogs. Zeus, the king of the gods, was displeased with the human population. Zeus told Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, to construct an ark for himself and his wife Pyrrha. After 9 days of flooding, the world was destroyed and the ark rested on top of Mount Parnassus. When the waters receded, Deucalion and his wife offered a sacrifice to Zeus to learn how to repopulate the earth. Zeus told them to throw stones over their shoulders. The stones thrown by Deucalion became men, and those thrown behind Pyrrha became women. According to the Hindus, Manu, the first man, which was the equivalent of Noah or probably Adam, was not visited by a god, but rather by a fish who told Manu the world would be destroyed in a great flood. Manu built a boat and tied it to the horn of the great fish. The fish guided Manu's boat through the floods and, not surprisingly, to the top of a mountain. When the waters receded, Manu performed a ritual sacrifice, poured butter and sour milk into the sea. After a year, a woman arose from the waters and announced herself as the daughter of Manu. So it was Manu and his daughter that repopulated the earth. Many other cultures had their own versions of the apocalyptic flood stories, with either global impact or limited to their locations. This begins to raise a possibility that there may have been some truth to the story. And because of these similarities, possibilities that these stories may have the same origin, but varied as the stories passed from mouth to mouth, and mankind spread after the flood to the ends of the earth, and vary from culture to culture. There are also so many geoscientific evidences that some widespread flooding could have happened after the last ice age, which could have covered most of the planet, if not all of the planet. Apparently, the search for Noah's Ark has been ongoing since antiquity. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus wrote, Now all the barbarian historians make mention of this flood and of this ark, among whom is Berosus the Chaldean. For when he is describing the circumstance of the flood, he goes on thus: "It is said that there is still some part of this ship in Armenia, at the mountain of the Chaldeans, and that some people carry off pieces of bitumen, which they take away, and use chiefly as amulets, for averting of mischiefs." The Christian historian Eusebius also reports that people were searching for Noah's Ark. Modern activity searching for the Ark has focused on the slopes of Mount Ararat in Turkey. Others have searched the mountains in Armenia. Several explorers such as Frederick Parrott and James Bryce have searched and made claims to find some things of the Ark. David Allen Deal proposed that the Ark must first have come to rest on the mountain south of Ararat at an elevation of about 7,400 feet, and that the hull of the Ark must have provided basic raw materials for the occupants of the first post-flood cities. They must have stripped away planks and beams to build roofs, and used the melted down bitumen as tar to seal their roofs from rain. He also proposed that the Ark must have slid down from the first landing after an earthquake and rains. In 1957, some aerial pictures taken while searching for Soviet missile bases showed a boat-shaped formation about the size of 2 football pitches, seen at about 6,300 feet above sea level. Though these claims were initially dismissed as nothing but a geographic formation, several people believed there was need for more investigation. One of such people was Ron Wyatt, a nurse and amateur archaeologist, and what he found was rather striking. At this point, most people were looking for a 437-foot long vessel, but he figured, using the Royal Egyptian cubits, that over 500 feet was the more likely measurement, since Moses, the author of the book of Genesis, was raised as an Egyptian. When he finally got the opportunity to measure and examine the site after an earthquake had exposed more of the structure, he was able to measure the length of the structure. What he measured was exactly 515 feet long. Let's take a moment to examine the Royal Egyptian cubits. The actual length of a Royal Egyptian cubit is 20.62 inches. Given the length of 300 cubits as described in the Bible, when you multiply 20.62 by 300, you get 6,185 inches. If you convert these to feet, you get 515.5 feet. For many people who already believed in the flood story, the size and the shape of these structures was enough evidence, and there was no more need for convincing. However, another striking thing was that there was evidence that this structure had slid down from a higher area and lodged onto a limestone ridge. Tracing upward the possible path of the slide, Ron Wyatt found an area where the slide probably began. This confirmed David Deal's theory. Let's go back to David Deal's theory and break it down a little more. He suggested the first area where the Ark must have rested was at an elevation of 7,400 feet, and that after a descent, it must have dropped about 1,200 feet. This area is known as Mesha Naxuan. Mesha is a variation of the word Moshe, which we know from the Bible as Moses, which means saved through water. Also, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it was said that he traveled to the mountains of Mashu to find Utnapishtim. We can assume that this was Noah, and Gilgamesh means the man who revealed Mesha. According to Armenian historian Moses of Cronensis, the phrase place of first descent implies that there is a place of second descent, and that's exactly what the evidence on the mountain is telling us. However, Wyatt undertook more extensive investigative work over the next 10 years, utilizing such methods as subsurface interface radar scanning, metal detection surveys, core drilling, and the numerous other methods that were available to him at that time. Some of the yields of the core drilling were astonishing to say the least. These include petrified animal dung or coprolite, cat and human hair, and even man-made fabric. They also found well-outlined metal readings along the length and breadth of the structure, but not beyond it. One specimen of particular interest was a piece of petrified laminated wood. It seemed as if several pieces of wood had been somehow glued and fastened together to form a strong beam. It was thought that there was no technology of this sort until modern times. Other findings that confirm that this indeed is the Ark of Noah are occupied ancient cities at the Ark site at 6,500 feet elevation. Huge ancient anchor stones were found in a village near the Ark and had markings of 8 crosses, which probably depict the 8 survivors of the flood, and that the early settlers believed it too. There was also a rock formation which seemed to be an ancient signboard or a stele, which depicted the boat, 8 faces, and several birds. This probably commemorated the landing. The Turkish government also recognized this place as a tourist attraction, as it was in ancient times from all the evidence we've seen. Arguably, this is one of the century's most important archaeological finds, with biblical and historical significance. And just as the Bible had said, it was found somewhere along the ranges of the mountains of Ararat. But more specifically, it's located on the slopes of Mount Judy. This brings together the biblical stories, the stories of the Quran, and the stories of Gilgamesh. Though till today, there are some in the scientific community that disagree with all this evidence. Their only argument being it's unlikely the story is true. It's really a lot of evidence to overlook as just a mere coincidence. And with all this proof laid in front of us, the story of Noah, Nu, Utnapishtim, Atrahasis is probably the only story that can be found in so many cultures and religions, with so much similarities, and the most provable biblical story there is. And there is no real doubt that it actually happened, only people trying hard to discredit its existence.